Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim, LCSW, your source for the latest tips and practical down-to-earth advice on creating emotionally connected, thriving relationships. Now, here's Stuart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. You know, they say that everyone needs a support system. Growing up, one of the things that I recall everyone in my life was telling me is that the people in your life and who you hang out with really make a difference. And if you surround yourself with the right people, you will be successful, because successful people hang out with successful people. Loving people also hang out with loving people. Relationships that are positive and bring you joy, those people are the ones that I want to hang out with. And one of the people that I tend to want to interact with are also other EFT therapists. And I've come across somebody recently who is one of the more positive people that I've ever met, and one of the more wonderfully giving, caring people that I've ever met. I met Brittany Wagner at a Facebook group for therapists that I have been participating in, which is a supportive network of therapists that are all learning about sending our message out and trying to help the couples in our practices really understand that it really only takes one person who you know has your back. And by having someone in your life like that, you will be able to really understand that you're important to your partner. And as a result of that, feeling loved and feeling like your world is in a great place because you're not alone. The other thing that I want to share is that part of what I wanted to have Brittany on is because Brittany is a clinician who's been working with couples for quite a while, but is going to go through some training. And the training she's going through is something called Core Skills. And that's for counselors who have been working in the field, who are trying to really understand attachment theory. What we know is that attachment theory is the basic ingredient that as counselors, we need to be able to walk people through understanding how their deep emotions really is where the attachment is formed. And that if we can feel that our partners are there for us in a deep, vulnerable place where we can be authentic and vulnerable and transparent, then you will know that your partner is truly there for you and loves all of you, loves the parts of you that you love, parts of you you don't necessarily love, but that your partner really sees you as the expression. What went through my head, it's really funny. What went through my head is the cat's meow. And what we mean by that is that your partner really looks at you and says, my world is in such a great place because this person is in it. That I am so lucky that this person has found me by chance, our paths crossed, and now I'm with that one person in the world that I know I can count on. And as clinicians, in order to really help a couple do that, to be able to really go through the steps that are necessary, to help a couple walk the walk, as they say, we as counselors have to be able to do that as well. And what we do and what the training as an EFT therapist is all about is you get exposed to the model in usually a community forum, and there's actually one going to be here in Phoenix on Tuesday, which is called an externship. The externship is really where counselors who have been in practice or other disciplines, helping professionals, go to really learn about EFT and what's it all about. And once you go through an externship, you learn what it is, and if it makes sense to you, you then sign up to go through a year-long program. And the year-long program is the actual work that goes into learning how to help couples really understand this. But what we know as counselors and what we know as people is that the only way you really can help couples and understand what they're going through is if we as counselors go through the same thing. So what we do is we meet on a year-long training program, 2 weekends, every other weekend, for a year. And what we do is we learn from one another. We learn from role-playing. We learn how the model works and how we can help couples really understand that. And part of why I want to bring Brittany on is she is now involved in that. And the experience, at least that I had when I did Core Skills, and that's what it's called, it was the most incredibly powerful experience of my lifetime. I met other people who were basically going through what I was going through. And quite frankly, for me, it was maybe even harder because I was older. I had already been set in my ways. So I had to unlearn everything that I was doing because the new research on love and relationships said the way we were working with couples, although it may be helpful, it wasn't long lasting. And that people need to really connect on a much deeper level. So what we did is we role-played our own lives, our own experiences, and people's connection in that group, because you go through all this year-long training with the same group of people, and rather quickly you begin to connect. And I want to talk a little bit with Brittany on her experience in Core Skills. She's now done one of those weekends, and a little bit about why she's chosen EFT, a little bit about what she does, so you, my listeners, can get to know her and see the kind of incredible human being she is, and also to help you really understand that if you're seeking out help for your marriage, there's lots of choices out there. People say that they're marriage counselors. Not everyone really understands couples counseling in the same way. And I want Brittany to talk a little bit about her experience, her life, so that all of us, learning from her, because you learn from each other, really, so I can help all of you really make some choices when you're seeking out, or if you know someone seeking out some help. What type of counselor really we look for? Because there's lots of it out there. There's lots of choices out there. Brittany Wagner received her master's degree in counseling from Texas Woman University. She's an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor, has worked in many different settings, community mental health, colleges, worked in residential treatment centers, and some vocational training. She also has a practice that's in Sherman, Texas, and it's called Tide Mark Therapy. She primarily is working with people with relationship difficulties and couples, and now using EFT as a model to help people manage their emotions and communicate their needs to the partner. Brittany, welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, one of the questions I like asking folks that come on the show, because it's always interesting to me why people do what they do for a living. Tell me a little bit about what made you decide to go into the mental health field and working in relationships in particular.
Well, I think going into the mental health field, really honestly, what drew me to that was just trying to understand my own self, why I was engaging in behaviors that I was engaging in, and also trying to understand my family. It's really kind of a funny story because I initially wanted to go into psychiatry, and once I got into chemistry 101, I totally flunked that, and I was like, okay, what else can I do? And so
not good to be a doctor and not be able to do sciences and math, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, I'll do therapy. That'll work. It's still in the same general vicinity and area. And what specifically drew me to working with couples was really honestly my own experience with my relationship, because when my husband and I began living together, we're both really stubborn people. And so we got into a lot of fights, and it was really hard for us to like get out of our fights. And so we went to couples counseling ourselves, and it was just one of the most profound experiences that I ever had. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to give this to other people. I've got to help them reach what we reached, because it can just be life transforming.
So the experience you had as a client of a couples counselor was a positive one then?
Oh, absolutely. And whether she knew it or not, she wasn't strictly doing EFT, but it was, strongly based on that.
So when you decided to do couples work and you began to work in the field, what was that like?
Okay, so it was really just generally scary in the beginning, because I started working with couples before I'd even heard of EFT. And I'd have couples in my office, and they would just be, arguing, and I'd be like, oh crap, what do I do? How do I break up this fight? And I really felt like I was lost, and I just kind of stumbled upon EFT because I got to go to one of Sue Johnson's like introductions to EFT and what EFT was about. And I just really fell in love with the whole process. And I was like, I've got to learn more about this, because it just seems like it really fits for me.
So when you say that it fit for you both personally and professionally, or just in one area?
Both personally and professionally, because I was like, I can see how this could be, transforming in my own relationship. And then professionally, that's what I'd been searching for all along. I've been, doing therapy. I've been in the mental health field for about 7 years. So it just really fit with how I viewed the world and how I viewed relationships and how people interact with one another.
So the counseling that you were doing with your husband, was that while you were a therapist, or was that?
Yes.
One of the experiences that I always have had in my life, particularly when I was new to emotionally focused therapy or even couples work, was you sort of feel like a hypocrite sometimes, don't you? When you're going through the day helping others, and then you go home and then you find that you get caught up into the same kind of craziness that they do, and you go, I'm supposed to be the one helping these guys. How could I? That whole dissonance is sort of an interesting challenge, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Because there was times when I felt like this, and I'm like, if I can't even get it right in my own relationship, how am I supposed to be helping couples do this? And it was just honestly like I had to realize that it's so much harder to be objective in your own relationships.
Right. And I think so many people begin to get all worked up, particularly when they look at their partner and they see that the emotions that are coming from the interaction feel so bad.
Yeah.
And how do you make sense of that? So for you, having come from that, and it sounds like you had a good experience with a counselor, was there something that was about that experience prior to EFT now that you found so valuable?
Yeah, actually, she really, she said, hey, when Brittany says this, or Bill, my husband, when Bill says this, how does that really, what comes up for you? How does that make you feel? And to just see how devastated that my husband was, and knowing that he was hurting me, was just oh my gosh, he really actually does care, which is really what I was questioning at the time.
So his ability to really stay in touch with your experience really was what made the difference for you, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And for him to really swallow his pride and really look at his feelings, yes.
Now, men, I think, get a bad rap with this in terms of this whole feelings thing. What's been your experience as a counselor in terms of men and women and the gender differences, and how do men just, they just don't go there? They don't really feel the same things? Or where do you put that, both as a couples counselor and also now learning somewhat about EFT?
Really, honestly, my perception is that honestly, men probably feel way more than women do. It's just that they're not shown how to express it or given permission to express it. And so to have really that inner turmoil going on and saying, oh my gosh, like I have all these feelings, but I don't know what to do with them, like really softens my heart towards men and going, hey, like, let's try to help them be able to express this a little bit better.
Yeah, what I like to tell folks, and actually I say this a lot in my office to the women, just because a man doesn't express the emotion, that doesn't mean they don't experience the emotion. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that's so powerful about EFT, and I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about this as well, is it's such an experiential model. What exactly does that mean?
Well, for an experiential model, what it really means is that for the first time, couples are really able to see one another, to feel like they can rely on one another and actually connect and communicate. And part of how the couples begin doing that in therapy is to kind of let their walls down and really come from this vulnerable place and being able to feel like they're comfortable enough to be able to express their feelings and really getting to the heart of the matter.
And what does that mean when you say heart of the matter? I love that term, but I think that that's an interesting term that gets thrown around.
Yeah, well, I really think it's getting past the superficial details of what's going on in a relationship, like, oh, he forgot to take out the trash, to, oh my gosh, when he doesn't take out the trash, that really makes me think that I'm unimportant or that what I want doesn't matter. And so they're able to really get in touch with their own feelings and to actually look at themselves for the first time. And that really helps them view what another person's role in the relationship is like, what their partner's role is like.
See, what I like to say in terms of this whole heart, literally the heart of the matter. I think, when we think about romance and we think about relationships, what we're really talking about is being able to have an effect on our partners that are heart to heart, love to love. And that what happens is that if we can talk about what gets in the way of you really feeling loved by your partner, like the trash isn't about the trash. It's really about, are you really there for me? Are you someone that's going to make my world easier because you're in it and we're in this together? And if I can feel that I'm important to you. So I think what happens is that when we begin to talk and overtly state those things, then we can really hear and see what really is going on.
Yes, absolutely.
And within the core skills, you talked about the videos and you talked about those things, but what did you find in terms of the people and the counselors there and their interactions with one another and sort of the bonding? Because I know that I found at least, there was some incredible bonding that took place between people.
Absolutely. I saw so many therapists that had returned from the externship that we were at together like a few months prior, and to just be able to see those people again. There was about 3 or 4 classmates that I had that were really similar. It was really nice knowing that they were in it too, and that we could just really reconnect and share our own thoughts, our own concerns, and really go, hey, I don't have a good grasp on this. Can you help me out with this? Every single therapist in the core skills training group is really about helping one another and helping them grow professionally and personally.
One of the things that we talked a lot about at Core Skills, and I know you were only at the first weekend, and I think one of the things that's interesting, and this is something that I think I want people to understand, is that when you start this process, usually similar to, I think, with couples, where you are very defensive and you don't want to necessarily be so vulnerable, and that as the weekends progress, and some groups are more than others, there really is an opening that comes and people begin to share much more of themselves. And that vulnerability is so respected by each other that it really brings people closer, or counselors who maybe never knew each other or having so many different experiences now are seeing each other sort of in a similar way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think I saw most of this happening. I don't know what your experience was in Core Skills, but we do what's called live sessions. So where an actual real life couple comes in and we see the EFT guru or trainer, whatever you want to call them, they actually do therapy in front of a whole class, and it lasts about an hour and a half. And then the whole class gives feedback towards the couples about what the experience was like and what they appreciated and got from it. And to see how open the other therapists are in saying, oh my gosh, this really hit home for me because this has happened in my personal life, or your feelings really moved me. And to see that actually the other therapists having tears in their eyes for couples, I don't think that there's a stronger bonding moment than that right there.
Would the counselors then reflect it back to their own lives at all? Because I know that was the role playing that, it's interesting because it starts out as role playing, but then as time goes on and as you get to know each other better, it really became not really role playing, but this is my life out here. So that there really is a similar experience that you as a counselor in training on EFT are having the same exact experiences that your couples will have when you are doing this in the office.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because you can really see that there's a common pattern and common issues that really come up in couples. And that's true of your own life. We're just as susceptible as to problems that come up in our relationships as much as, just regular everyday couples that come into our office.
Right. And then that experience of having that vulnerability, did you find by the time the weekend, and this was your first weekend, correct?
Yes, it was.
Did you find that from the point of where you guys were when you first started the weekend, the first day, what did you notice was different by the time people were saying goodbye at the end of the weekend between the people in the room?
Mm-hmm. What I think was really the big change was everybody that was in the room on day one, they were so concerned about performance and, hey, am I actually getting this skill right? And then it morphed into, oh my gosh, this is a common feeling that we all have. We understand it a lot better. And it actually came from a much vulnerable place. And you could tell that the connection with the other therapists in the room, it was just very palpable.
So that vulnerability actually fueled the connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating because what you're really talking about is the experience in the training is exactly what couples need to have, is to recognize that the vulnerability, when you show vulnerability with your partner, when you are just really authentic, and I think that's what I found is that clinicians who go through this really begin to identify their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and are vulnerable with each other. And to the feedback that you then get from the other counselors on those vulnerable spots is what bonded you.
Yes, absolutely. Because you could tell that the other therapists really care about you getting these skills down pat and really care about your feelings and making sure that you're not feeling like you're scared or anything like that.
So it becomes a common experience.
Yes.
How do you think that plays itself out when people are looking to have a counselor work on their relationship or their marriage? How does this model help couples different than some of the other ones in your mind?
Well, some of the other ones, I think that they really just focus on very surface level. We've got a communication issue here. Let's figure this out. And it's very, for lack of a better word, it's very like, okay, do A, B, C, and D. And then if E happens, then you've got to do F too. And it's just very concrete.
So the behavioral piece you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's very much behavioral. And I really feel like that the experiential piece that you get with EFT is really what helps bond partners back together and helps create a better solid connection for them. And when you're just focusing on problems and trying to resolve problems, if it's a behavioral piece or a cognitive piece, it doesn't really get at the root of the issue.
So what I'm hearing you say is that based on allowing yourselves as a counselor or as just someone in a relationship to be vulnerable and open, to accept that you are who you are, and that showing the world who you are, showing your partner in particular who you are, that attachment from feeling their presence really brings you closer together to allow you to take more risks.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you find that within yourself in core skills? What was your experience personally there in terms of your own sort of anxiousness, and then how did it blossom?
Well, in my group that I had, my little miniature group, there was one particular person that was just very skilled, and it just seemed like she had the whole EFT core skills thing down pat. Like there was no reason for her to even go to these classes. And so I found myself comparing myself to her a lot and going, oh my gosh, like how can I not like get to that? And I was thinking, I know what I need to do. I need to fix this and I need to fix this as far as skills go. And I really started worrying about that a lot. But as we began to be more vulnerable with the other therapists and say, hey, look, help me get to this point. How is it that you can do that? How is it that you can talk more about a person's feelings and really get them to connect with those feelings? Then it really all came together, and that connection piece with the other therapists just transformed into something spectacular.
So what I'm hearing is you saying that in some ways when you started out being a little bit sort of defensive and not sure you want to show your doubts and your insecurities and worrying a lot about how you might look to the other counselors, and then through being open and sharing and everyone else sharing, that went away, and that you no longer were worrying about that, and it was more about recognizing that you're in this together.
Yes, like we can teach one another. We're in this together. And if we don't know how to figure something out, by gosh, we'll ask a lot of questions and it'll all work out okay.
And you'll do it with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely.
So that really is the same as what you're doing with the couples, that you're helping couples really understand that we all have similar needs, and that if you let a partner in, if you let your other team player, I like to call it sort of your teammate in, that you don't have to feel so alone, and that when you don't feel alone, you're able to do more, take more risks, and really feel that you're not alone and you can accomplish anything you set your mind to.
Absolutely. We do that all the time with couples. If the one thing that couples can go away from with our time in therapy is that you guys are united, you guys are in this together, you can count on one another.
But what about the couples in your mind, from what you've seen in your practice and how you see sort of what happens with these cycles, that couples who start out not seeing each other as really on your side? How do you go about switching that to really letting people drop those defenses?
Honestly, like it's a process, but really what happens is the more that we can get couples talking about their fears and their concerns and their true feelings, like it really hurts me when you do this, and actually be able to help the other partner listen to that and truly soak it in. That's what really helps couples get to that point of where they can really feel like they're in this together.
And I think one of the things that you do very well is you really let the people that you interact with, the couples that you see, really see that it's not like you have all the answers. It's that you know the path, and that if you could facilitate them going through the steps, that you really have a blueprint at this point, a blueprint to help them really see if you do these things, you're going to feel closer and more connected, and that you show up in the office with them to really demonstrate being real, and that you don't have to have all the answers.
Absolutely. And I'll be the first to admit that if I don't have the answers, I'm going to let you know. And if there's a way that I can find out the answers, I'll do my best to do it. But I think that them realizing that, hey, I'm not really the expert in this, I'm just your guide, I think really helps take the pressure off of the couples.
You know, what I've started to tell folks is that, you know, there's only one thing that really will get in the way of you accomplishing the goal of really feeling important to each other, and that's giving up. And that if you don't give up, because of what we now know about relationships and some of the research that we've done, we know that it's approximately, I think, 80% of couples going through EFT have been successful. And there are other attachment models, and I don't think we're here to say one is better than the other, but you need to find a counselor who has a model that has success rates, that you know that there is a method and a pathway, and that so many couple counselors think it's no different than seeing individuals. I just seeing two people in the office. And that those are the counselors that also get swept away in the same triggers and the same cycles. So what would be your advice to people who are wanting to seek out a counselor? How should they go about doing that?
Honestly, I say do your research, and as you're looking at people's profiles or you're looking at people's websites, really see if what they're writing to you, if their passion is really there behind it. Because if a therapist isn't feeling passionate about it, and it just sounds like they pulled something out of like a dictionary or just have these very rote sentences that don't have a lot of feeling in it, then that's probably not going to be the therapist for you. Because if they're not passionate about it, they're not going to make a whole lot of progress.
Yeah, I would agree with the passion, but I usually add one more dimension, and I think you would agree, Brittany, which is if you're speaking with them prior to maybe getting involved, and you ask them, how will you help me? They need to be able to, in very specific terms, tell you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You know, we're going to sit down together, we're going to do an assessment, we're going to identify your attachment needs, and then we have a plan of going step by step through those surface emotions and get to the vulnerability, which really demonstrates to that person that you have a method. So many people say, well, we'll get together and we're going to talk about what bothers you and then we'll fix it. I mean, what does that tell you? That doesn't tell you anything.
That just tells you that they're flying by the seat of their pants.
Right. And that's really, for me, and I think for you too, the power of this has been, I really feel like there's a plan that we now can learn and then help couples learn that same plan.
Absolutely.
What was the hardest part of Core Skills for you?
I wouldn't really say that there was any really hard part, just rewarding parts. Well, if I back that up, the hardest part was really for me, like, I don't know how much your audience knows about the different types of positions or patterns that we get into in a relationship, but there's something called the withdrawer and the pursuer. It was really hard for me to role play as a withdrawer. and not talk about what was problematic for me. So,
do you feel like you could explain to the audience what the difference between the two are?
Yeah, a pursuer is much more ready to really talk about what the problems are and, hey, how are we going to fix this? And a withdrawer is going, nope, everything's fine. I'm just going to stay in happy land where I'm at and just try to ignore the situation.
And I think the other piece of a pursuer and withdrawer is the withdrawer tends to feel like the best option is to sort of shut down, because otherwise the relationship will get worse. And the pursuer is very invested in, I know that if we don't talk about these things, it will get worse. So it's really sort of this opposite. And how do you bring those two pieces together is part of the counseling.
Yes.
I learned so much about myself through Core Skills, and I think I want to end today with that final question for you, Brittany, which is, through this experience, both, and it doesn't have to be just in Core Skills, through your work and your learning as a couples counselor, what have you learned about yourself through this process?
I think through myself, like I said before, I was very much a pursuer in my own relationship. And so when my husband tended to shut things down, that just really made me angry. And so I was really surprised at learning EFT and really reading Hold Me Tight, which is a book by Sue Johnson. That just really kind of helped to let the anger dissipate, because I was able to talk to my husband on a more meaningful and vulnerable level, and to really realize that, hey, I can go through life without being angry at my husband all the time, was just one of the best experiences ever that I've learned about myself.
And it sounds like as a result of that, you felt stronger as a person.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because nobody ever likes being angry.
Well, Brittany, I want to just thank you for coming here and sharing your experience with Core Skills, a little bit about your practice, and talk a little bit before we end. I forgot to ask that question. Talk a little bit about your practice in Texas and how people can get hold of you, and a little bit about what you do there.
Sure. My practice in Texas is called Tidemark Therapy. You can find me at www.tidemarktherapy.com. You can also find me on Psychology Today if you want to try to get in touch with me. And who I really like working with are the couples. So if you have relationship issues, especially if there's trauma or PTSD involved, or you guys are an LGBT couple, I would really enjoy working with you guys.
And one of the things that I know you're going to be doing, and we'll have in the show notes, is that you're giving out to the audience some information, aren't you?
Yeah, it's 5 things that we should really be talking about in our relationships with our couples. So if you want to go ahead and get that PDF, you can do it by signing up for my email list, or I think, Stuart,
we're going to have a link on the show notes that people can get that for free. So
yes,
thank you for doing that and giving that out. So Brittany, thank you for coming on, giving of yourself, giving of your time. I think my audience really was able to sort of understand how powerful this is, and a little bit about that as a EFT therapist. The advantage to couples is really having a real understanding of what does it take to feel loved. So thank you for coming on.
No problem. I thoroughly enjoyed it, Stuart. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Take care now, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with your host, Stuart Fensterheim. You're one step closer to reigniting that fiery passion with your partner. For more information and your 30-minute free phone consultation with Stuart, visit www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. We'll see you next time.